Welcome to the Uncredible Podcast. My name's Jeremy, and I'm Uncredible. Still trying to figure out where to put the microphone. Too close, too far away? I don't know. So we're back at it, back on schedule. It is Friday morning for once. I think the last 3 or 4 weeks we've been a little off schedule, but we're back on schedule. Friday morning, kids are at school, nothing holding me back. So let's first take a look at the Substack this week and what's going on at uncredible.me. And what I'm going to try to do, I kind of fell apart on this, but 2 to 3 episodes ago, I was going to try to start only giving you a heads up on what's coming. If you want to know what's already up on the Substack, just go check it out. But next week on the Substack, we got 2 articles, one of which, the new article for next Wednesday, that's the one I've actually been building to that for probably 3 or 4 weeks. I wrote that article. It's called 1,547 1,547 miles later. And I wrote this article when I hit my 1-year anniversary of running. And basically I went back through, I shouldn't say 1-year anniversary, my 1-year anniversary of tracking my running on my Fitbit specifically, because I started walking back in 2020. That's when I started losing weight. This 1-year mark really is a marker for when I got my Google Pixel Watch 3. It's a Fitbit app that then I later connected to Strava. I don't think I'm at my Strava 1-year anniversary just yet, but this marks 1-year anniversary of tracking consistently through the same metric of my Pixel Watch. I'm actually thinking about getting a cheap Garmin to use for my runs, but this would be a full year of running that included my races, my 5K, my 2 half marathons, and my marathon. So all those races were a part of that year, and it eliminates. So when I look at 2025 calendar year, I think I logged about 1,200 miles. But this article tracks from when I started tracking that year. So last year when I started walk, I was actually elliptical running. It wasn't really running. I was using the elliptical in January and February. So and most of March, I think. So I really didn't have any running logged miles. And even if I had, I wouldn't have been tracking them the way that I have been. So 2025 mileage was 1,200 miles. However, when you look at March to March, which is when I wrote this article, I logged 1,547 miles. And so basically that article covers the whole year, kind of touches on each aspect of my development throughout the last year in terms of running, how I shifted from being focused on calories and losing weight, and then shifted my focus to running races and all of that. So it kind of covers the whole gamut. And one of the reasons I say that I've been building to this article is I wrote the article, and as I was writing the article, I realized that I could be linking back to a whole bunch of other articles that I had written, and a lot of those articles were still on medium.com, and I hadn't posted them in the Substack yet. So I was like, I really don't want this new article to post until I had all the other running articles, like my 5K review, my half marathon, my full marathon, and then my winter warrior half marathon in January. I wanted all of those articles recorded and on the Substack before this published, so that as you're reading through my year, like recounting that year of running, you can go, hey, I would like to learn more about that. This dude ran a mile, ran a half marathon a mile. This dude ran a half marathon in the winter. What was that about? And you can click the link. So I've been building to this with the throwback articles for probably about a month and a half, and really excited for it to come out. So that'll be next Wednesday on the Substack at uncredible.me. And then this poor article. This is another throwback article next Thursday, Missing from Our Memories. And man, I love this article. um, it's a really touching article, actually. It goes back to last summer when I finally acquired a camcorder that would successfully record or transfer videos from my mother-in-law's tapes. She had these M8 tapes that I just could not. They don't fit in a VCR, and they don't fit. I have a converter. I don't have it sitting here. I have a lot of the technology sitting here, but I don't have that. When I was a kid, my dad used these, like, I don't know the terms right now. I think the terms are in the article, but these tapes that you could put into a bigger VHS cassette, you put them in, and then you could put that tape in the VHS. But my mother-in-law's tapes were Sony M8 tapes, and you needed a special VCR or a camcorder to run them. So I was finally able to acquire the camcorder, transfer all the videotapes, both from my family and my wife's family that they had, and get them all on a digital side. So it was really exciting to be able to do that. But as I was doing that whole video transfer, I noticed that as a child transferring my family's videos, it occurred to me that the memories that they were trying to preserve for themselves were not the same memories that I would want to remember. And so, for example, my parents are not in those videos, because when you're trying to preserve memories, you're trying to preserve memories for yourself. But what I found is, in this process of converting these old tapes into digital, is that, man, a lot of these memories aren't for me. They're not for my wife. As kids, they were for my parents. And as a result, they're not in it because they're the ones behind the camera. And so it's just an encouragement. That article is just kind of like something to get people to think about in this day and age of cameras and videos and photos, and just be aware of the fact that the memories you're trying to preserve may not be the memories that your kids want to remember. And so my suggestion is, every now and again, make sure, like for example, a lot of families will record or take pictures of what happens at Christmas time, right? Opening gifts and all this, or birthday parties is another great example. And so you'll take the camera out, and so you'll sing happy birthday to whoever's birthday it is. So let's say you're a kid and you're sitting there, and your perspective is them bringing the cake, them singing the song. You're not ever going to remember or even want to remember yourself. Maybe a little bit, but you're going to remember that just fine. What you're going to want to remember is that image of your mom or dad, singing to you. And so give them the camera. Let them take some video of you, of things that they might want to remember. And when you do that, later on in life, as you're coming to the end of age, those memories that you're preserving, they're not going to be for you, because you're going to pass away. The memories you're going to preserve, that they're going to want to preserve, are memories of you when you're gone. And so my encouragement is to just be aware of the fact that you should be in the videos that you're preserving for memories down the road. Now, we're going to run into a whole nother issue with I was thinking about this too. I think there was maybe 8 or 10 tapes from each family for the whole of our childhood, from like all the 90s into the mid 2000s, right? There was maybe 8 tapes per family. How in the world are our kids going to wade through the enormous amount of information? I have a hard drive that is 4 terabytes, and it's probably about not quite half full of pictures and videos of my kids as children, and just at one point I was saving the photos and videos every month, and I have a year and then a folder of month, and it's like, man, I would not want to be like 20 or 30 years from now. I would not want to be my son or my daughter trying to weed through all those files and to find a memory. But the nice thing is, and this is going to sound maybe not, it's probably going to sound selfish or praising something that a lot of people don't want to praise. But the one good thing about the whole selfie movement and people videoing themselves is that there will be this problem of our parents missing from our videos. Hopefully that won't be a problem because we've kind of turned the camera around and looked at ourselves. Maybe in 20 or 30 years you're going to find out that people weren't paying enough attention to their kids and filming that. Like kids are going to be like, oh, there's no video of me. My mom was just, my mom or dad was just taking pictures of herself the whole time. So this whole thing might just flip on its head. But next week on the Substack, there are 2 articles coming out. 1,547 miles later, just a review of my year of running, and then missing from our memories, throwback article to transferring video. I am going to be doing an article. It's a throwback article. I don't know when it's coming out because I don't think I've even put it in the system yet to be published, but it's close, of how the process and the tools that you need to convert old videos. So if you read that article and you're thinking, wow, I'd like to be able to transfer my parents' old videos or my grandparents' old videos, I have a whole article where I talk about how to do that. It's actually not that hard. You don't have to send your VHS tapes in the mail and all that stuff. You don't have to do that. It's pretty inexpensive. It's somewhat, you do need a certain level of technical ability to do it, but it's not that difficult. It is a little time consuming the way I do it. Essentially what you have to do is you have to get a decent computer, get the components, which, the most expensive thing that I bought in order to do it was the camcorder, which was over $100. But if you're doing a standard VHS tape or something that can fit in a standard VHS player, you can pretty much do the whole thing with a decent amount of time and an average computer and maybe like $50 because the converter is only like 20, and then you got to find a used VHS player somewhere. So it's not that expensive. It, like I said, does require time because the tricky part specifically with old tapes is you have to hit play on the VHS player and record on your computer, and then you have to let it run. So there's a certain amount of time that's involved, but you don't have to sit there and watch it. What I would do is I would let it run for like 2 hours, let the VHS tape pop out, and then I'd go back and cut off the tail end of it, and then I'd have my whole tape. Anyway, that article will be down the road next week. Missing from our memories will be our throwback article on Thursday, and then 1,547 miles later, just a review of my whole year of running last year into 2026. All right, that takes care of the Substack at uncredible.me. Now let's turn our attention to a week in review, my running this past week. This particular week is not going to have a long run, which has really been my focus for a lot of these segments for the last, probably the whole podcast. If I go back all the way, I think when I first started the podcast, I did some review work on the Winter Warrior half marathon. So I think that was in there. But in terms of this training block, a lot of my focus has been on that long run every Saturday. And this week I don't have one to share because I talked about last week's long run in last week's podcast because I ran it on Sunday. I think I recorded on Sunday last week. So I had already talked about last Saturday's long run. So we are in week 15 of the Buffalo Marathon training, which what that means is 5 weeks away from the Buffalo Marathon. And it's hard to believe that it's coming up that quick. 5 weeks is still quite a bit of time to train. But I'm actually getting to that point in my training block where instead of ramping up my mileage, I'm going to be pulling back. And this week wasn't ideal, but I think it was necessary to do what I did. So picking up from Sunday, I decided after I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, probably 3 weeks ago, I did a really, what I would say a successful long run. I had a good 21-mile run, felt great the whole run, had some easy aspects to it, but for the most part, it was a pretty good run. And since then, I've been dealing with some soreness and some pain in my right side. It's mostly been hip pain. Some of it has been, I'm not sure if it's shin splints, but my right shin has been giving me trouble. But it's it's all been on the right side. And it persisted last week. It severely affected my long run last Saturday, which I talked about in our last episode. So coming into Sunday and into this week 15 of training, I decided I needed to dial it back. And I'm so glad that I did. I'm going to talk about the mileage that I ran this week and how how my pain progressed. And then my main topic is going to be on pain management as well, so I won't get too much into that here. Stick around till after the news segment, and I'll share a little bit more about pain management in general. But last Sunday and Monday, I did 1.5 miles, and I pretty much have called every run this week a recovery run. I think it was Thursday. We'll get to that in a minute. But I think it was Thursday when I said, okay, we're getting past the recovery aspect of this, so let's do some timed stuff. But I really wasn't going for time this week. I specifically told myself not to chase any PRs or anything like that. So Sunday and Monday, I did 1.5 miles. I would say I wrote down in my notes here for Monday, that 1.5 miles, I was feeling about 65%. So my hip was still in pain. When I got done with it, I had this residual, like, resonating pain in my shin. I wasn't sure. I'm still not 100% sure, but I wasn't sure if the hip might be causing the shin pain. I've had some internal thigh adductor pain as well, but it's not like, when I say pain, it's just sort of like there, you know? It's sort of like a light throbbing, and most of the day I don't even feel it. It pops up throughout the day and you're like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm still sore from XYZ. It's kind of what it was. So Sunday, Monday, I did 1.5 miles, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I ran 3.2 to 3 miles. One of those days, I want to say Wednesday, might have been Tuesday. I think maybe it was Tuesday. I was feeling pretty good, but I also I have this thing where I always got to challenge myself, right? And I was very persistent in telling myself, do not push yourself for speed. So one of these days, I threw my 20-pound weight vest on and went for a run. That was ill-advised. In fact, the guy who got me into running just got back from Florida, and he texted me that day, and I told him I just got done with a weighted vest run. I've been taking it easy. And he's like, do you think that running with a weighted vest was a good idea? And I was like, I didn't say it was a good idea. I just have this weird thing where I have to push myself, and it's been a challenge all week just trying to dial it back and take it easy. So I want to say that was Tuesday, because I think that was also the day that Strava glitched out on me again. I've been having a hard time Mondays and Tuesdays. It seems like one of those runs glitches out, like it doesn't connect to Strava. So I have mine set up to where my Fitbit, my Pixel Watch 3, does the recording of the actual workout. And I have it directly synced to Strava so that when I get home, I can just, typically when I log into the Strava app, it pops up and I just log the information. But last week and this week it was on Tuesday, last week it was on Monday, I went into the Strava app and it doesn't pop up. And then it's not there. Now last week was weird because I downloaded the TCX file, which is the file that records your GPS and your distance and all that, from Fitbit, and I tried to upload it to Strava, and it was like, no GPS info. I was like, that's weird. So I manually input that particular workout into Strava, and then the next day, the one that didn't sync ended up syncing, and it popped up, and I'm like, so then I had 2 workouts for that day, and I'm like, what the heck? So I had to delete the manual one and relog everything in. It's very frustrating. So this week, the TCX file loaded in with the GPS information. I uploaded it, and on my Fitbit, my Pixel Watch, it says 3.29. I think it was 2.5 or 2.9 miles. And when I uploaded the file from the Fitbit tracking to Strava, I did this all manually, but I did it on the website where you download the TCX file from Fitbit, upload it to Strava. That file said that I had it was 3.0 miles. And I'm like, I don't understand, like, how the data is tracked. I know it's not a constant running, and I know GPS isn't perfect, and I know the connections aren't 100%, but I just don't understand how it can be off by a quarter of a mile. Just kind of confusing to me, especially when the TCX file that I downloaded from Fitbit, the Fitbit loaded in at 3.2 miles. So why would that file say anything other than 3.2 miles? I don't fully understand it. There's probably somebody who understands tech better than me, but it's one of the reasons that I'm thinking about getting a Garmin instead. The other reason is I've heard from a couple of people that Garmin's that don't have a touch screen that are only button related are better for runs because you won't accidentally hit your watch and stop it or whatever. And I've had that problem over the course of the last year running with my Pixel Watch. I love my Pixel Watch. Wouldn't trade it for anything in terms of as a watch. However, from a running standpoint, particularly with sleeves on, it can be a real problem. And so I've gotten in the habit of locking the screen, but I wouldn't have to do any of that with a Garmin if I had a Garmin that didn't have a touch screen. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I did basically 3 miles, 3.25 miles. None of those were time related until Thursday. And Thursday, I was in this weird place where I knew I had given my body time to adjust and heal. I had reduced my mileage significantly. And I thought, let's not push pace too hard, but let's see if I can just do a controlled 9-minute mile for the whole 3 miles. And I wasn't able to do it, and it didn't have anything to do with the pain. I did it for 2 straight miles, and then I was like, I can do it. I was feeling good. Didn't feel the need to push it. So I just stopped. My goal for this particular training block has been to train myself in a way that I can have a confident, controlled 3 hour and 55-minute marathon. So I was telling myself for this Thursday run, I'm going to do the same thing tomorrow for my long run. I just kept telling myself, controlled. I have a tendency when I start my runs to go too fast, and then late in the race, I say late in the race, late in the run, it doesn't matter how long the run is. I push myself too hard early, and then I end up wearing out. So I'm trying to tell myself early and often, control. Don't get into this panic, nervous, frantic thing where you feel like you have to run fast the whole run. Just be controlled. And that's what I've trained for. And I'm trying to kind of repeat that to myself because I have a tendency to just want to go, and that wears you out. So I'm trying to get better at being very intentional about my pace, not trying to go too fast or to slow down and then make it up, but to just dial in that 9-minute. If I can do 9 minutes per mile every mile, I've got my goal. So that's kind of what I'm going to try to do tomorrow. Tomorrow's Saturday. It's my last long run of this training block. I shouldn't say my last long run, but it's going to be my last attempt at near 20 miles for this training block. After that, I'm going to start dialing back the long runs by, I think it was 20 or 25% each week. And then the 2 I'm going to do for the 2 weeks leading up to the marathon, I'm going to do a pretty significant taper because in the past, I have not done a good job with tapering, and I think it's affected my runs. So I'm going to try to get that straightened out. Today, I'm going to do another 3 mile recovery run, maybe 1.5 miles. I don't know. I'm not too worried about it. But I am going to try to get out there and right after the podcast and do a little run, try to keep it controlled again and do that 3 miles. That's my objective. So that pretty much covers the week in running. We could call it a deload week, but basically what I've been trying to do is to just get my right leg back to where I don't feel any residual pain. And I think I'm close. I think I'm pretty much there. This is the first time. I think this is the first time since. I'm trying to be careful that I don't. When I first started running and I was over 200 pounds, I had problems with shin splints. But since this last year, I have not had any shin splints issues, and this is the first time that I could say I think what I'm dealing with in my right leg is shin splint related, and it's all left over from that 20-mile long run and the couple of attempts I did at getting my fastest 5K. So both of those things really seem to have hurt me a little bit in terms of my physical ability. Probably good for me long term because I'm strengthening things. But yeah, that pretty much covers the week in training. It gets us caught up to where I'm finally back on schedule too, where tomorrow I'll run my long run, and we'll talk about the week 15 long run in next week's podcast. All right, now let's turn our attention to what's going on in the news. Let's do our Uncredible take on what's going on in the news. So, a couple of things that have happened over the last couple of weeks. First of all, I don't know anything about the Strait of Hormuz, but obviously from an economic standpoint, it's become a problem for the United States of America. And the whole economic impact of this war is fascinating to me. I listened to a really great episode of Piers Morgan yesterday where they had representatives from China who were talking about how this affects Chinese economics as well. And it's very fascinating to understand how interconnected the world is economically. But more interestingly enough is the way the conversation has shifted over the last 2.5 to 3 weeks about the Strait of Hormuz. It was like, we're going to close the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's going to let people through the Strait of Hormuz for a fee. They're going to open it completely. And then Donald Trump was saying, oh, it'll just open naturally. And then at one point he said, if we have enough oil, we don't need it open. So if you want it open, go get it yourself. It's been, the messaging on this has been crazy. And then the most recent situation, which I haven't followed too closely the last few days, but after saying the Strait of Hormuz would just open naturally because trade and flow or whatever, America had done so much damage to Iran that it's just going to open. Then all of a sudden, he's sending U.S. naval ships to block the Strait of Hormuz because the Iranians were letting only people that they were working with through. And the only people that were getting through, it sounds like, was Chinese trade. And so Trump goes down there to shut the whole thing down. And it's like, imagine saying to somebody that, I don't really need this thing and I don't really want this thing, but you can't have it either. It's just the weirdest thing. It's like, oh, the Strait of Hormuz is not that big of a deal. You better open it. Stop blocking it. And then, you know what? Fine. I'll block it myself. It's just the weirdest conversation that's going on with this Strait of Hormuz. And the whole conversation on it has just been so muddled that it's obviously a big deal economically. It's obvious that it affects the U.S., but the way in which it affects the U.S. isn't clear. It sort of seems like that the hurt that it causes is secondary, in that we may not directly benefit from it, but somehow in the grand scheme of things, of how things are interconnected, we get affected by it. And so we have to step in there and do something with it. And now we're kind of in this position where if we can't get through, nobody can get through. So it's a weird situation. And one thing I'm worried about is prices. That's the Uncredible lens on this whole thing, or the Uncredible take on this whole thing, is how is this going to long-term affect people who are just everyday people? Because our wages do not go up because the Strait of Hormuz is closed. The companies that we work for are not going to, their costs are going to go up, which in turn leads to us as individuals' costs going up, but we can't raise our wage. A company can raise its cost to do goods, right? So if it costs me 20% more, we might need to charge 20% more on the back end in order to cover that cost. Workers don't get to do that. It's always delayed for the worker or the person who earns money from the company. So while the company can recoup rather quickly its expenses and the cost that it gets affected, it takes years for the economy to really pay back the worker. And in the grand scheme of things, you don't ever get paid back because you lose 3 years of wages while the prices are up here and your wages are chasing to catch up to it. And so this is, instantly probably not going to hurt too many Americans, but the longer this goes on, the more damage it's going to do. And so it kind of sucks in that respect. But along with that whole Iran war, Strait of Hormuz thing is this Trump Jesus photo. I'm at the point now. Last week I talked about the moon landing, or not the moon landing, the moon photos from Artemis 2 and how it's hard to tell what's real and what's fake anymore. Every day when I see a screenshot or like a Facebook post of a screenshot of a Truth Social thing from Donald Trump, my natural assumption is that this is fake. And then I'll be listening to like a show like Piers Morgan or Dave Smith, Part of the Problem, or Joe Rogan. I'll be listening to these podcasts and they'll talk about it. And I'm like, did he really post that? And this one was like, and he admitted to posting it, which is even crazier. This photo of Donald Trump as Jesus Christ. And what's crazy is his reasoning is that he thought he was a doctor in the picture. And it's like, on what planet do you look like a doctor in that photo? And it's just wild to see where we're at in the world. But like the other crazy thing is having been professionally trained in dispensational theology, which I've talked about in the past. I think it was like episode 6 or 7, where I talked about dispensationalism and theology and its relation to this war. I am blown away at the irony of what I would call the end times Christians not seeing the irony in their support of Donald Trump. It blows my mind that these people, it's the people like Paula White who believe that there's going to be an antichrist who rise up, who like how they don't see the correlation between the fiction books that were written when I was in high school, Left Behind series and all that, how they don't see the correlation between Donald Trump and those images is mind-blowing to me, because he actually is the first president that fits those pictures better than anyone ever. And I would fully expect those guys to be writing books about how he's the Antichrist. Like, I would fully expect that based on what he's been doing, and they're not doing it. And it's like, I used to joke that there's a verse in the Bible that says, in the end times, there will be a strong delusion. And I used to think that it would be funny if the strong delusion was the people who actually believed in the end time stuff. That the irony there would not be lost on me. And it was just a joke that, like, because I don't believe that eschatology is biblical. I don't think it comes from the Bible at all. I think it's impressed upon the Bible. And I think it's just an offshoot of people's imaginations. And I honestly think it's cultic activity, but all that to the side. The point is, if you were to give me a list, and I need to do some research and see if I can find an old clip of somebody describing what the dispensational premillennial Antichrist is going to look like, because Trump fits it like to a T. It's crazy. He's trying to get peace in the Middle East. He's trying to bring peace to Israel. He's presenting himself as a person of peace. The fact that he was shot, but one of the prophecies that they always lean on is that he's going to have like a wound, like he was a wound on his head, like he was dead, but he didn't die. And I'm like, I don't know how people are missing this. I would expect those people not to support him, but the people who fall into that camp, or who have historically, from my perspective, fallen into that camp, support him. And I'm like, you can't make this stuff up. You really can't. I'll have to do some digging and see if I can draw that correlation. But this Trump Jesus photo, wild that he shared it, and just all the stuff he posts on Truth Social. It's like so weird the way he's posting it. And my thought on it is something that I thought when Biden was in there as well, and when these two were facing each other for this election. My thought on it is, we need to stop. There needs to be a maximum age for leadership in this country. There has to be, because like right now, and this happened with Joe Biden as well, but the opposing party had legitimate reasons to suggest that there were mental issues that would disqualify this person from the presidency. And whether it's true or not, one way to avoid that being an issue is to stop voting and presenting candidates who are in their 80s, for crying out loud. Like, when most people are in nursing homes, we're electing those people to go to the White House. It's insane. Like, there's already a minimum age, which I think is 30 or 35. I think it's 35 to be the president. Why can't there be a maximum? And I've always suggested that, I've always told people when they ask me about this, that they should take the average age, and they could do this, they could update this every 10 years. They could come up with some way of doing this on a regular cycle so that if it has a significant change, we can update it appropriately. But I've always thought that if the average lifespan, like let's say the average lifespan is 75. I don't know what it is. I could look it up, but it doesn't matter. But let's say the average lifespan of an American is 75. You cannot be elected to presidential office if you will reach the average lifespan of an American based on that study, whether it's every 10 years or whenever it gets updated. You can't be elected president if during your presidency you will cross that line. So like if the line is 75, you are not eligible to run for president if you're 71. And you could do it based on their birthday. You could do it based whatever it is. But basically what we're saying, or what we would be saying with that policy is it is a national security issue to have a president who could have dementia. I mean, think about that. I mean, think about, let's say Donald Trump or Joe Biden had dementia. Have you ever visited people in a nursing home? Like, imagine giving them the power to make decisions for the country and like putting a suit and tie on them and putting them in front of like what we've seen over the last, I think 12 years is safe with Joe Biden and Donald Trump as president is people this age probably shouldn't be leading the country. And if for no other reason, the fact that they are susceptible to mental decline and health decline. I think that's fair to say, and I think that's true in general. Now, it would be interesting. I should look up what the average. I should look it up right now. I'm going to do it because now I'm curious. Okay, so according to, this is just the first thing that pops up, so who knows if this is accurate, but according to preliminary CDC data for 2024, the average life expectancy at birth in the U.S. reached a record high of 79 years, with 81.4 years for females and 76.5 years for males. So that throws different. You'd have to find, well, the average is 79. And so I think that's fair. That would mean that if you're over the age of 75, you can't run for president. I think that's fair. Is that fair? I don't know. That seems fair to me. I wonder what that's changed. I'm going to go back to like 1995 and see how different it was then. Oh, it was 75 then too. So in 1995, it was 75 years. So it would have been 71 and change because this is 75.8. So like it's shifted over the last, 95, 05, 15, 25. So in the last 30 years, it's shifted 4 years in the favor of, so your age limit has gone up. I think that's okay. I think that's cool. I think prorating it in that way is fine. I still feel a little bit uncomfortable with 75 years old as the starting age, but I think that gives a limit that's reasonable, that everyone could agree to. Maybe I'm wrong. But I've always thought that you say, oh, well, you can't discriminate based on age. Well, we already do. You can't be president if you're 35. So, like, we're already doing it. So let's just cap it on the other end for the same reasons, right? I would assume the reasons for the youth is that you don't have enough experience. You haven't learned enough. You might be there might be prone to making poor judgments or whatever. It's the same problem on the back end when you decline mentally. So let's just use the same argument, the same rationale for the back end of it, and that would give you, I mean, think about this. 35 to 75 is your age range for running for president. that sounds reasonable to me. I even like the idea of 35 to 70. That feels right to me. I'm just going off the cuff. What that would bump you into is if somebody ran at the age of like 70 and then they couldn't run again at 74. Would that be such a bad thing? Yeah, you know what it might do? It might incentivize both the Republican and Democrat parties to start looking for younger blood. And I do think that's something that we need because of the way technology is shifting as well. But man, I'll tell you, when I look at where we're at and what's going on with Trump, I honestly don't think he has dementia. I don't think he's like a crazy old man. I mean, he is on some level a crazy old man. But I don't think that's what's happening. However, I do think that possibility is there, and we could avoid it altogether if we just didn't allow it. That's my thought. And the same with Biden. Like, I think everyone agrees on some level that there was something going on there with Joe Biden, depending on your political beliefs, you'd be more extreme or less extreme on that belief system. But there was something going on. Like, whatever it wasn't good, and it was age related. I mean, I think we could all agree with that. So yeah. Oh, and what I wanted to talk about with this Trump Jesus photo is I've heard different positions on the photo. Some people saying it's blasphemy, some people saying it was just out of line. What I haven't heard, and this was a debate that was going on when I was going to I think it was OPC, Orthodox Presbyterian Churches. I was studying the Orthodox Presbyterian Church back in years 2015, we'll say 2014. We'll say 2015, 2016. And there were certain Presbyterian churches, and I'm sure this is true in other denominations as well, but this is where I first encountered it. There were certain churches where they wouldn't allow images of Jesus because they thought it violated one of the 10 commandments on iconography, where you can't make an image of God. And because Jesus Christ is the Son of God, or God incarnate, theologically speaking, that when you present an image in the church of Jesus Christ, that is an icon that you could worship. And so the argument always went back and forth as to whether or not you should have images of Jesus or the cross. There were some other things too. Different churches had different limits on the whole thing. But the idea was that you were violating this idea of worshiping icons in the church, and that it was a violation of the 10 Commandments, and you shouldn't do that because that's sin. I haven't even heard that talked about, but this is like 10 times worse than that. But so not only is representing yourself as Jesus Christ in and of itself blasphemy, it violates, like, on its face, this idea of worshiping icons. And one thing that I find ironic is that there are Christian religious people who, whether they want to admit it or not, are basically worshiping Trump. He can do no wrong. He might as well be Jesus to them. And let me say this. There were Christians who were on the left side of things who did the same thing with Biden. So people have this tendency to like worship people and ideas and the representations of those ideas. That's pretty much a human thing. And that's definitely happening on some level. Like, if you can't look at it, if that image comes up and you see nothing wrong with it, like I heard one commentator say that it was a joke. Now that lands if it's presented as a joke. And Trump could have said, oh, it was just a joke. Like, haha, this is how liberals think I think. Or like if he'd have done that. But he didn't even, he was like, oh no, I shared it. I just thought I looked like somebody who was like a doctor. Like, well, what are you talking? Maybe that was the joke, because that was a joke. But like, if you look at that, he's the president. He's allowed to tell jokes, but if he doesn't make it clear that he's telling a joke, all of a sudden it gets kind of weird, because this is the same account that he posts like what he's doing in world events with Iran and trade deals. So like, it's, you kind of got to like signal that you're making a joke. Maybe you don't. Maybe he clearly doesn't. But I think if you're looking at that and you believe that he was posting it seriously, then you have to look at that and go, that was sacrilegious on some level. That was messed up. And if you don't, I just don't think you're being honest. That's my opinion. I mean, and you don't have to be religious to feel that way. I think if you just look at that and go, dude, what are you doing? Like, that's crossing a line, even for some atheists, like, or non-Christians. That's just like, I mean, I think there was actually an Islamic leader who said it was wrong. So, yeah, that was, I mean, even to I think even in Islam, Jesus is a prophet, and even they were offended. So it's like, ugh, imagine thinking you're a Christian and offending the Muslims with how you represent Christ. That's brutal. Like, wow. So, yeah. Okay, so that's all. Is that all the Trump stuff I had and all the news? Yeah, that was it. That was the end of the news stuff. So now that we've wrapped that up, let's get into our main topic and look at the world through an uncredible lens. And I'm going to talk about something that I don't feel fully confident that I am qualified to speak on. So I'm not a doctor. I don't even know if I have to say this stuff. I'm on YouTube, whatever, who cares? But I want to share my experience with pain management. I had an interesting conversation with a coworker yesterday about knee pain and what I believe he's dealing with, and what a lot of runners who are new to running or are new to increasing their mileage is IT band pain, which I dealt with in both of my knees last year, and hopefully learned a lesson or strengthened one or the other, because I haven't had it since. But I wanted to talk about pain management in running, and I want to look at how the best way to manage the pain in terms of when it first happens, and how difficult that can be for the average person, what I call uncredible, but the average person who goes to work every day, who has kids, who's working hard. And the challenge with some of the advice that I've seen for me personally, and I think it's tough for anyone in my situation, which would be most of us. So a lot of the advice that I see for dealing with pain, whatever it is, shin splints, knee pain, tight hips, hamstrings, quads, whatever the pain is, right? First of all is, and this is what was recommended to me personally, is this idea that you can take a few days off. It's not going to ruin your progress. And I'm trying to say this in a way that I would have listened to if I was telling me a year ago, when I was in June of last year running 200 miles in a month, because some people were telling me that I was increasing my mileage too fast, and that just fueled me more to push through. When you're inspired by people like Cameron Hanes and David Goggins and these ultra runners, when someone tells you that your pain, you can take a break, it's okay, that doesn't hit exactly how you would think, because what it sounds like to the person who's struggling with that pain is, it sounds like weakness and failure. And that person, at least me personally, is going to hear that as a challenge. Like, oh, you should take a few days off. Oh, I'm going to run 10 more miles tomorrow. I don't want to say that you shouldn't do it, and I don't want to say that you can't do it, because here's the reality. You probably can. You know, if you've read or listened to David Goggins' book, or you've listened to Endure by Cameron Hanes, or Overcoming, if you've listened to any of these audiobooks or listened to any of these podcasts of ultra runners and people who push through pain, you know, physically you could probably do it. Mentally, you could probably push through. And the question then becomes, is this what's the most efficient for my goals? And I think that's where the conversation starts to change a little bit. And a lot does depend on what your goals are. But like for me personally, when I look back to where I was a year ago, And when I was struggling with IT band pain, particularly it started in my left leg, was the first place I had it. I was searching for ways to manage that or mitigate that pain while still running. And I was told both online and by other people in real life, the guy who got me kind of into racing specifically said, hey, take a few days off. It's not going to hurt your progress. For somebody who is doing this for, I'm going to say for leisure, not for a sponsorship, not for a job, not getting paid to do it, the only motivation is health or growth, personal growth. And that person has a job and a family and other responsibilities well outside the realm of running or endurance racing or any of that stuff. When you say things like, you can take a few days off, it's not going to hurt your progress. Physically, that's accurate. Okay. You're not going to lose your cardio in a week. You're not going to lose the strength that you've built up in a week if you take a week off or 3 days off. However, what you might lose, and I think this is what I feared losing myself when this was recommended to me, is the drive to keep going. I'm going to talk about this in our quote too at the end of this episode. But, and I don't know how to explain this to people other than myself, other than to say that there is something happening mentally and emotionally with running for people who are doing this at their leisure. I don't want to say for the fun of it, and I even hate to use the word leisure because it's really hard for those people. Like it's hard to do it. And once they push that ball or that rock over the hill, if they stop, they might stop forever. Because there is so much to do. There's so much that occupies their mental and psychological and even physical abilities that if they turn it off, it might not come back on. And when you see a social media person who's sponsored or who does it for a living or whatever, who's a professional runner or a semi-professional runner, and that person says, oh, you can take a few days off, it'll be better for you in the long run. What they don't understand is what it took to get to that point mentally, to carve out those hours, to carve out that space. And they don't understand how easy it is for that space to get enveloped. And I'm not talking about the physical ability to do the task. I'm talking about that time commitment that's been given when somebody who's doing it purely, and I was thinking about this, talking about this earlier today. It, on some level, if you have a family and you're working and you're not getting paid and you're not dependent on running and you're doing it for health reasons or for mental reasons or whatever, this is going to sound wrong, but it's a fact. You're doing running for selfish reasons. And those selfish reasons are not necessarily bad. So I'm not saying selfish in a negative sense, but I'm saying it's for yourself. It might be to have better health, to get longevity in life so that you can live longer. But it's for you. And you might be able to convince yourself that it's for your kids in the long haul so that you're around longer, whatever. But at the end of the day, if you're doing this purely out of leisure, like, let me say it this way. If you could quit doing, whether it's lifting or running or whatever's causing the pain or the potential injury, if you could just turn it off and never turn back to it again. Like if you could switch it out for playing video games, or you could switch it out for going to the movies or watching Netflix. If you could do that and have no change to your life. Let me put it to you this way. If you're sponsored or if you're getting paid or you're getting some sort of promotion from running, I'm just using running because that's what I'm doing. Turning it off affects you financially, right? I could stop running tomorrow, never run again, and I make the same amount of money. My family's still here. In fact, it's worse than that, right? For people in my situation, people I call uncredible. We can stop doing these endurance things, never come back to them, and in a weird way, be better off. We can convince ourselves that we're better off, because I could be sitting and watching TV right now. You say, well, it's not better off. Health-wise, no, it's not. You're right. But I don't have to do this. And so going back to the point, when I started having IT band pain, I had set a goal for myself to run 200 miles in a month. And every time someone told me, oh, you could just take a day off, I was like, no, if I take a day off, then I'm going to have to run, instead of running 3 miles that day, the next day I'll have to run 6, and that's going to be way harder with this IT band pain. And what I was afraid of, and anybody who's done dieting or exercise or whatever, is I know in my own mind that if I stop doing this for like 3 days, flipping that switch back on becomes so much harder. So much harder. And I've done it with weight loss. I've done it with dieting. I've done it with running. I've done it with walking. And I've done it with weightlifting. In fact, I'm doing it right now actively with weightlifting. I set weightlifting aside for a few days, and I haven't done weightlifting in like 6 months. I got to get back to it. It's something on my list that I need to get back to after this marathon. It is so easy for when you have pain for somebody to say to you, oh, just take a few days off. And the reason I'm sharing this is because this week, in order to manage my own pain, I did not want to stop running. I didn't want to take a break. So what I did instead was I dialed back my mileage significantly, down from like 40 miles the last couple of weeks down to like, I'll probably end up, depending on how the long run goes tomorrow, I'll probably end up around 28 to 32. So I dropped 12 to 15 miles, but more importantly, instead of running like 7 or 8 miles, I'm running 2 or 3. And I'm feeling better. Like I'm seeing my body get better. I'm not in pain as much. Now, what I will tell you is if you're dealing with pain, IT band pain, soreness, whatever, if you stop, it will get better. And I know it sounds dumb to say that, but I was telling somebody yesterday, last night, my coworker, who's dealing with IT band pain. He's in the same exact position I was in a year ago, where he just started running up again, and he's training for a half marathon, and he's having this IT band pain, and he's increased his mileage. And I told him, I said, what's your schedule? And he told me a schedule. And I said, what I would recommend you do in order to get rid of this knee pain is try to stop running for 3 to 4 days. And that could be skipping one long run, which he believes he needs. I don't think he needs it. I think he'll be fine without it. But mentally, he won't be fine. Or he needs to cut out a couple of his shorter runs, but he'll have to do like cut out 2 of them in order to get the consecutive days of no running. Now, the other thing I recommended to him, because he was exactly like I was a year ago. Like, I can't, if I stop running now, I might not hit this goal or that goal. And it's like, it's not true, but mentally and emotionally, it feels like if I skip this long run, then I won't be able to complete my marathon, or I won't be able to complete my half marathon, or I won't be able to hit my goal. It feels that way. So the reality is that pain may also cause you not to hit your goal. So by not doing it, you may not hit the goal because of the pain, and then you will learn that lesson. However, the other option I threw out to him was, because he's still a long ways out from his half marathon that he's training for, was to keep going and manage the pain the best that you can. And when you get close to your half marathon, taper, like seriously taper, like back all the way off for your taper. And then your leg will heal during the taper. And hopefully when you get to your race, it won't reemerge. And it's reemerging for him around miles like 4, 5, and 6, somewhere in there. The point being, with pain management for uncredible people, if you don't have any motivation to run, like any external pressure to do it. If nobody and nothing in this world is pushing you to do it other than yourself, you're doing it for your own, proving something to yourself, proving something to those around you. It's you driving yourself. If that's all there is, you might not be able to stop mentally. Probably what's best for you physically is that you stop, but there is a truth to this idea that if you stop, you may not go back. And so what I want to recommend, and again, this is purely my anecdote, is what I've done for the last week is dialing back my mileage has been very effective in allowing me to continue to have this routine, which keeps me sane, and I do enjoy the running, and it keeps me focused on those goals without feeling like I quit. It's been effective. I got better. Now, is it going to work in every injury case? I honestly don't know if it would have worked for my IT band pain. A lot of my personal IT band issues were elevation related. So when I did my long runs back then, I was stupidly going up this one hill that was like short. I shouldn't say short. It was up. The elevation was a slow incline up, and then it dropped off the backside, and that downhill was killing me, and it took me months to figure that out. And so then I got away from the elevation. So that was my issue. If it's overuse, dialing back the mileage is really the best thing I can say, because then you won't lose a step in terms of your routine. And when you lose that routine and you're someone who's uncredible, you realize how comfortable it could be if you quit doing it. And I'm telling you, for those of us who are mentally the way that I am and the way I think this coworker is, we're driving for a goal, and we think that if we stop, we fail. And while that's not true, I can say objectively that's not true. And I think if you were to go online and you were to talk to coaches and things like that, they would say, listen, it's actually probably better for you physically if you would just stop. The reality is mentally, it feels like failure. And that leads, we who are uncredible know what that means. We're going to start to feel like a failure. We're going to spiral out, and then we're going to stop running altogether. And it could be 6 months, it could be 8 months, it could be a year, depending on how that failure affects us in our everyday life. Because if you take a couple of skipped runs and you throw on top of that a couple of summer responsibilities, like right now I'm working on my pool. Oh, I got to focus on this pool. I don't have time to run. All of a sudden, those things, like I said, they will envelop that time, that energy, that motivation, that passion. And the second you get distracted, you go full squirrel on that thing, it's very much over. If there's nothing pulling us back to it, it could really cause it to stop. And then we really do fail, because then we quit. And we don't want to quit. That's not in us. That's not what we want to be. That's not who we want to be. So when I talk about pain management, just purely anecdotally from my own perspective, talking to myself a year ago, I would say the best thing physically for you is probably to stop. Take a few days off, ice, the normal pain management things, ice, rest, elevation, all that stuff that you're going to hear from everyone else. Mentally, that might not be the best move. And you may need to just reduce mileage. You may need to find a way to keep your routine intact, your running routine, whether it's 4 days a week, every day, if you're like a run streak or whatever your thing is. It might just be reducing mileage or even reducing pace. So it might be like, let's say you're doing 3 miles 4 days a week. I'm just trying to think of somebody who might be doing something like a 10K or a half marathon training. Maybe you just drop your pace down by like 2 minutes. Maybe you walk instead of run. I suggested to this guy, but he's chasing steps too, that he jump on the elliptical. Something that would reduce the amount of impact or the amount of strain on those exact same muscles, but continue to push you forward in your goals so that you don't lose the routine. So I think as somebody who is mentally driven the same way as this individual, who is not financially or in any other way obligated to run or to do any of this endurance stuff, losing that routine, if that's a big issue for you, but you want to regain the physical ability to do the thing, I really like what I did for this last week, where I just dialed back my mileage, allowed the pain to slowly subside, and I can say with confidence that the pain is mostly gone. I'm like, I'll say this, I am like 90% sure that tomorrow I'm going to be able to run 18 to 20 miles. One thing that I'm going to do in order to ensure that is I'm going to go to the mall and do my mall run, which is just flat laps around the mall, not inside the mall, outside the mall. Haven't done that in a while, and I think that's going to help me be able to just focus on fueling and pace without dealing with any elevation or any issues like that. But yeah, for my uncredible take, looking at pain management through an uncredible lens, I would say if that routine is important to you and to hitting your goals, and you think that if you stop running or you slow down somehow, it's going to affect you, the best thing I can suggest is like halving your mileage. Physically, the best thing for you would be probably to stop for like 3 to 4 days or maybe even a week. But if you can't do that, cut that mileage down, slow the pace down. It's not quitting. It's not giving up on your goal. And I would set a clear timeline for the reduction and the increase. For me, this week, my goal was all low mileage days until the long run. It's all about the long run for me this week. I could have said 1 mile a day and no more for the whole week. I could have said that. My biggest mistake this week was strapping on that stupid 20-pound vest for no reason whatsoever. And all that was me thinking, it was part of this whole, why, like, even though I knew I was reducing my mileage for the sake of healing, I was still looking for ways to challenge myself, and I couldn't get out of that routine. So it's just something to think about. If you're somebody who is dealing with like what I would call overuse pain, the solution in order to keep your routine intact might just be to take a very intentional approach at looking at your mileage, reducing it, looking at the elevation gains and losses and changing those elevations so that they're more flat, adjusting your pace downward, like slower, so that you can recover. You've got to allow time for your body to recover. And I think we all know that. I think physically and mentally we know that, but I think emotionally, it's psychologically, applying that knowledge without losing our routine can be difficult. And so my suggestion would be look at other ways to reduce and give your body a chance to heal. All right, so that covers up the pain management and the main topic through an uncredible lens. Let's turn our attention to our podcast feature, which I actually have one this week. And, you know, this particular one, I'm in a weird place with the podcast feature because I love to do it. And now I'm in this weird place where I'm listening to all these different podcasts and I'm trying to determine whether or not it falls under the category of uncredible. And I don't think this one does, because this is a professional ultra runner, Sally McRae. She goes by the YellowRunner on Substack, and I think it's probably that way on Instagram. I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think she has been on Cameron Hanes' podcast, which the name of it eludes me right now. But yeah, so Sally McRae, the YellowRunner on Substack. And the reason I'm doing it is because I actually encountered her work on the Substack. If I had come across her in an interview on Cameron Hanes' podcast, I probably would have leaned away from this one. But I feel like, without being offensive, I feel like her approach to the things that I was listening to had an uncredible feel to it, or like a not intentionally professional feel. Like she's real. And I appreciated that about her, but she is a professional and she is credible. She's, one of her big things right now is that she's recently a free agent in the running market. So she's not like sponsored right now specifically, but she doesn't quite fit the uncredible thing. But I do think that least the episode that I listened to, was the first time. Well, let me say this. The podcast is called the Choose Strong Podcast. And the episode that I listened to, she was the first person to provide a convincing argument against wearing earbuds when you run. Now, I've joked about the fact that I literally, I've got earbuds in right now. I slam my earbuds completely in my ear. I don't use those open, I don't know what they're called, open where they go next to your ear and you can hear things. I don't do that. I'm good with it. I'm probably going to pay for that someday where I trip over something as I'm not paying attention or whatever. But her episode, I think it was like, I don't know, episode 130 something. It's about rattlesnakes. It's the most recent episode on her podcast. She talks about dodging rattlesnakes and how many rattlesnakes she's seeing on the trails. So 2 things she convinced me of. One, if I ever trail run, particularly down south, but if I ever trail run, she's convinced me that I need to at least dial back the music a little bit so that I can hear my surroundings. And she may have been the first person to convince me not to trail run at all, which was not her goal. I'm sure of that. But this episode where she talks about all the rattlesnakes she's seeing and how to manage the rattlesnakes and what to do around rattlesnakes. And I was just like, whew, that is not something that I'm interested in. Dealing with rattlesnakes on my runs. I have thought about doing an ultramarathon. However, the trail running aspect of ultramarathoning, where it's like tons of elevation and being out in the wilderness or extreme heat and all that, none of those aspects of it are appealing to me. That doesn't mean I won't ever try it. It just, listening to her podcast or about dealing with rattlesnakes was just very educational. The first time I've ever thought, boy, I don't want to do that. That does not sound like fun at all. I was just sitting there going, wow, how intense is it to be out there? And like we see all these videos of like David Goggins, Cameron Haynes, all these ultra marathoners, these trail runners doing all these things. I had never even thought about that aspect of the trail running. Like it's bad enough that you have to deal with all the physical problems of running a 100-miler or a 200-miler and all that stuff. The fueling and the sleep and the not sleeping and the hallucinations, which it seems like is a joke among trail runners and ultra runners. It's like, okay, I'm not sure that's a good thing. But then listening to her give a detailed 30 minutes on how to manage rattlesnakes, I was like, oh. But it was a good episode. I would actually prefer the second half to the first half, but it's all very interesting. Her talking about some of her background with contracts and sponsorship and now not being sponsored. It's all very interesting stuff if you're into the running space in general. But the rattlesnake stuff, a lot of the things, she debunks a lot of common misconceptions. And without being a doctor herself, but like different things that you've seen on TV or whatever, and gives some very practical things to do. Like one of the things she talks about is having a Sharpie. So if you get bit, by the way, this is crazy, but if you get bit, apparently every 15 minutes, you're supposed to draw a circle around how the venom is spreading and put a timestamp on it so that the doctors can tell how far it's spread, where it's going, and what they need to do at certain intervals and whatnot. So, and then another thing she said was don't run. Like my natural reaction would be like, hurry up and get to the hospital. Apparently that's not necessarily the best thing. I think she said that. Maybe she said that was a myth. I don't know. It's worth going back and listening to, especially if you want to be scared out of your mind for trail running. But I'm definitely going to be jumping back. I think she was on Cam Hanes' podcast, and I want to look more into her background and see if I can find that episode and listen to it. But really, if you're interested in trail running or even the professional side of sponsorship, she's going to have some interesting podcasts, I think, over the next few weeks, because she's still dealing with that whole not sponsored aspect of trail running, or ultra running. So check that out. It's Sally McRae, the YellowRunner, on Substack. By the way, let me just put this out there. There doesn't seem to be a lot of running content on Substack. So if you're hearing this, you're listening to this, and you're into running, it seems like there's a wide open invitation on Substack for you to jump on there and put your information out there. I would just recommend it because I see the short stuff that's happening on Instagram, and there's a lot of people who are putting in a lot of work, and Substack is a great platform. I mean, listen, this is coming from somebody who has played around since the mid 2010s. I've been playing around with what I'd say since 2008. Can I go back that far? At least since 2010, I've been playing around with web design, podcasting, video, platforms, WordPress. I've played around with all of it. And I even played around with medium.com, and Substack has really given me the best platform to do whatever I want with it. And it has the features for pay and subscription and all that you might want down the road, but you may not need on the front end. It really does have everything. And I'm not trying to be like a Substack promoter or whatever, but I'm shocked by how hard it's been. So like on Instagram, you can find runners and running influencers and content all over the place. But on Substack, there's really not a whole lot of it out there. So if you're a runner and you like to write or record, or you're trying to build a following or something like that, highly recommend checking out Substack. I'll be honest, it is a little clunky to set up, but once it's set up and you're rolling and you have kind of a flow with it, it works really well, especially if you don't want to do your own web design. I've done full WordPress installations. I've done from scratch websites, and there's always cost involved. With Substack, it's all free on the front end. So there's really no financial commitment. And one of the things I wanted to do, because I've done podcasts and blogs and sermon video and sermon editing, and I've done all this stuff in the past, there's always been like this upfront cost, whether it's the domain or whatever. I wanted to avoid all of that this time around and just really commit to putting the content out there and letting it grow on its own without me having some sort of like burden of financial commitment. Substack's made that possible for me. So, if you're in the running community, I would highly recommend you jump on there and check out the platform as a whole. But this is a podcast feature, not a Substack feature. So check out Sally McRae, the YellowRunner, on Substack. The podcast is on Spotify. It's called the Choose Strong Podcast. And that particular episode on rattlesnakes, highly recommend. I'll probably have an image or which episode that was. I don't exactly remember. And I'll try to link it in the show notes. Now, let's wrap things up with our quote of the week. And I really like this quote. It fits. It really fits. Let's see if I can do this right today. It really fits the content we've been talking about. Run when you can, walk if you have to, just never give up, by Dean Karnazes. I don't know how to say that last name at all. Run when you can, walk if you have to, just never give up. And I think that really fits the heart of what I was talking about today with pain management, with this week being a deload week for myself. Yes, stopping altogether might be what's best for your physical body, but for some of us, quitting like that feels like a betrayal of our training. It feels like a betrayal of our commitment to whatever goal we've set out to do. And so I think this quote really sums it up well. Run when you can, walk if you have to, crawl if you must, just never give up, and don't quit. Just keep going. Let's close things out. As always, thanks for listening to the Uncredible Podcast. Remember to subscribe to the Substack at uncredible.me. I've mentioned in the past, you can like and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. Appreciate that. It's great for the algorithm. But if you want to get the content, which is free, if you want to get the posts, if you want to get all that information, the best way is to just sign up to the Substack. And you'll get, right now, you'll be getting a Wednesday article, a Thursday article, which is a throwback article, and I don't want to say specifically, but the goal is every Saturday you'll get this podcast. So obviously the last couple of weeks we've had a couple bumps in the road. We had a skipped episode and then couple late ones. But the goal is to record on Friday and publish on Saturday. So on a normal week, you should be getting a new article on Wednesdays, a throwback article on Thursdays, and then a Saturday podcast. So check that out. I highly recommend just go to uncredible.me and sign up, and then you're going to get all that. So it'll just be in your email. If I'm behind on posts, you'll know because it'll be in your email. So you won't be like scrolling through Spotify or YouTube. Where's the most recent episode? It'll just show up in your email and you'll know it's there. That's, to me, it's the easiest way to go. So obviously, like and subscribe if you're using YouTube and Spotify. If that's your preference, awesome. I love it. But make sure you subscribe to get notifications, and if for no other reason, to help get us in the algorithm a little bit. So by the way, I'm trying to do better with getting my short videos onto YouTube. I post a lot of those short videos on the Substack notes and the Instagram, but I'm trying to get better at posting those on YouTube as well, because that video content is, a lot of people like that with the YouTube shorts. In my head, I think of the YouTube as, I'm calling it the YouTube like an old man or something. I think of YouTube as like the place for the podcast, the full episode. And I'm trying to get out of that way of thinking, because I know how important it is to put clips and shorts on there. So I'm trying to get more of those on there. So if you're on YouTube, you might start seeing a little bit more content from the short side. For Uncredible merch, check out merch.uncredible.me. That's merch.uncredible.me. And this is one of my favorite shirts. I'm wearing it today. Stickers, shirts, sweatshirts, cell phone cases. There are no cell phones on there. I'm sorry. So this shirt that I'm wearing is one of my more colorful ones. And then this sticker, I love this sticker. For the kids. And this is a sticker, but you can get these designs. I've got tons of designs on Redbubble. And the easiest way to access them is to just go through merch.uncredible.me. But you can get this colorful one in a sticker. You can get this colorful one in a shirt for kids if you got kids that are interested in that. If you got some Uncredible kids you want to praise or something like that. All that stuff's on merch.uncredible.me. And as I've said in the past, the Instagram at Jeremy Lundmark. That's JeremyLundmark. Instagram has a lot of the short social stuff. It also has all my runs. I usually post 2 photos a day of my run stats from Strava, which you can follow me on Strava too. I think the link to Strava is on the Instagram. I don't know the link off the top of my head, but if you're on Strava and you just want to follow my runs, you can do that as well. So yeah, check all those things out. Thanks for listening as always. Thanks for watching, and remember, stay uncredible.